We are back on the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and joining us now is Eric Kingson, who is co-director of Social Security Works. He is a professor of social work at Syracuse University's School of Social Work, senior research associate in the Maxwell School's Center for Policy Research. He has been an expert in this issue for a long time. He was a policy advisor to the 1982-83 National Commission on Social Security Reform and the 1994 Bipartisan Commission on Entitlement and Tax Reform. He is also the primary author of Ties That Bind, The Interdependence of Generations, Social Security and Medicare, a Policy Primer, author of The Diversity of the Baby Boom, and co-editor of Social Security in the 21st Century, and wrote Lessons from Joan, Living and Loving with Cancer, A Husband's Story, which is a beautiful book, and In Their Own Voices. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. RJ, it's great to hear your voice.
Yours too, and feel free to call me Richard. I go by both. I introduce myself by both names. The RJ thing was actually just to distract people when I still had corporate clients when I began writing again, so that they wouldn't realize it was the same guy, and then ban me from their, from working for them forever. But that's another story. So listen, this week was the August 14th, 79th birthday of Social Security, and I know you and Nancy Altman wrote a piece about this, but what should people be keeping in mind as we approach the 80th year of this program?
That we have a system that works. It works because we've made a strong investment in building something to protect ourselves against lost wages and retirement, disability, and death of a parent. We have a system that works and works well, that it's withstood wars and recessions and depressions, and there's every reason to think it will work well into the future. But most importantly, it's now time to talk about how to expand the system. And that is because we face a major set of crises. Retirement income crisis. The American working people face this, where well more than half will be unable to maintain their standards of living in retirement. That's people in their 50s, 40s, early 60s, 30s, and 20s. We have a job to do, and we have a job to do with Social Security also to support our families when our members have to take leave to care for children or care for themselves or care for an ill relative or friend. So there's an agenda. There's a capacity to move forward, and by gosh, our country can afford it.
One of the things, you mentioned a couple important things there. One of them that came to mind as you were saying that was this relationship among generations. The book, you were principal author, the Ties That Bind, The Interdependence of Generations. The idea that, first of all, if you look at it from an actuarial or economic fiscal point of view, the differences in people are sometimes opponents of Social Security, or those who would cut it, sometimes harp on intergenerational wealth transfer as a theme, and they use all sorts of misleading figures. When you strip those out, it's really trivial. But what's underlying all of this is the sense that, first of all, in my to tell me what you think. First of all, that they complain about baby boomers, but then turn around and propose policies that would hurt younger people, and secondly, that they forget that we are in this together, which was one of the things I think implied by what you were saying. So how do we remind people that we're in this together?
I think that's critical, Richard. Bottom line is nobody gets anywhere in life without help from others in some way or another. Not the most successful, rigid individualist or anyone else. Everyone benefits from those who came before them, parents who hopefully reared them, if not parents, teachers, roads we drive on, roads that companies use to send commerce forward. And Social Security is a core part of that. This is a structure that enables us to do things together, do things for ourselves that we can't do by ourselves, that we must do together. The creation of a fake intergenerational crisis, which has been used repeatedly to argue that Social Security isn't going to be there, it's unfair. These are the same people who want to shred the Social Security program for younger generations. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, they say it's unsustainable. We have to protect it for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. You look at what they're doing, and they're leaving their children and great-grandchildren and others with a system that is deeply flawed, deeply weakened, and would pay far less in benefits to Americans than what we have today, even if Congress does nothing. One thing that's often forgotten, and I'm not going to harp on this. They like to talk about Social Security is going broke. It's going belly up. Well, that's ridiculous. Even though people believe that because they've heard it over and over again by groups that want to change the system to their benefit, perhaps some Wall Street interested groups, financial managers, and ideologues who just don't like the system. But the reality is, as long as Americans are working in the future, then it has an ongoing stream of income that easily meets 3/4 of the projected benefits people have earned. There's a lot more we can do. But the other reality is, as long as Americans have families and a sense for each other, as you're pointing out, there are linkages across generations, and there are benefits for everyone for having a good Social Security system. My children don't have to worry about my retirement because I have Social Security. Other things, too. I'm fortunate. But my children are freed up to focus on some of their needs. Our young children are protected with Social Security life insurance. Most Americans don't know this, but it's the single most important life insurance most Americans have for their children, worth almost $600,000 for a family with a couple of young kids. So that's we are all in it together, to just go back to that. And nobody gets ahead without others helping them. We help each other in families, from diapering our children to disciplining them, to raising them, to helping them go forward as adults. We help in all sorts of ways, and we do some of that privately, and some of it we do through government.
And I can't help but thinking as we talk about this that it's not just the intergenerational relationship, but there once was a time when successful people in this country, financially successful people, were grateful for that and appreciated and understood what their country had done for them. I always think of Colonel Tom Parker, who was Elvis Presley's manager, who said, it said at one point, I consider it my patriotic duty to keep Elvis in the 92% tax bracket because the highest tax rate was 92% back then, and that was understood and accepted under a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower. And now we have a situation where, as Thomas Piketty and others have shown us, the inherited wealth is getting massive and distorting the economy for everyone. And more often than not, and by the way, Alan Simpson is a child of privilege and prosperity, among others. It seems that everyone who is leading the charge and funding the charge to dismantle Social Security is doing quite well for themselves, whether it's the Wall Streeters who fund the Third Way Group, or whether it's the Pete Peterson, the hedge fund billionaire who funds so many of these efforts and has employed Simpson and others in so many different situations, or the spokespeople like Simpson. And so it seems to me that, and I'm curious your thoughts about this, and then we'll take a break, but it seems to me that this is also another form of class warfare being waged on 99% of the population by the extraordinarily wealthy. You think that's a fair conclusion?
I think it's a very fair conclusion. I laugh. They talk about protecting these programs for their children, grandchildren. Well, that's really what it's about. It's protecting them for the children of the very well off. Not that it's what they propose would cut the system dramatically for everyone else. I think you're right when you say something's been lost. President Eisenhower, our moderate Republican president, he used to look at people like Pete Peterson and look at the people like the Koch brothers, and he had this wonderful quote which says, there are a few people who would basically says a few people who would pull apart Social Security, Medicare, farm subsidies, and the like. They are small and they are few. Of course, there are folks like H.L. Hunt, the oil man. That's sort of the equivalent of our Koch brothers today. They are few and they are stupid. That's our plain,
I didn't know that
wonderful quote. You haven't heard that one, huh?
No, I love it.
It's even better when I'm not paraphrasing it, but it's really quite remarkable. It's in a letter to his brother Edgar Eisenhower.
That's wonderful.
Look, Eisenhower was an interesting man. He believed in institutions. He was not a civil rights person. He grew up with a belief in segregation, but the law of the land was that the schools were going to be integrated, and by God, he brought the troops in to integrate and enforce the Supreme Court decision of 1954. So it's different from what we have today. We have people today who want to tear apart anything, on the right. They'll tear apart anything they don't believe in. The Koch brothers' father was involved back then as a John Bircher.